Step into History Page, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings timeless mysteries to life.
A luxurious yacht slices through the English Channel, its passengers cloaked in wealth and secrets. But when Sir Reginald Ashbourne vanishes, leaving only a smear of blood and a cryptic note, the sapphire yacht becomes a floating prison of suspicion. Was he murdered? Did he fall overboard? Or is he hiding, orchestrating a deadly game to unmask a traitor? A blood-stained rope, a discarded jacket, a vial of chloroform. Each clue deepens the mystery. As Hercule Poirot's little gray cells unravel a web of lies, debts, and betrayal, one question burns. Who aboard this gilded cage can be trusted? Step aboard, where every glance hides a secret, and the truth is as treacherous as the sea. Chapter 1. The Sapphire Yacht Sets Sail. The late summer sun cast a golden sheen across the waters of the English Channel, where the Sapphire Yacht lay moored at the quaint harbor of St. Marguerite. The vessel, a marvel of polished teak and gleaming brass, was no ordinary craft. It belonged to Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a retired industrialist whose fortune in steel had afforded him such luxuries. The yacht, with its sleek lines and opulent cabins, was the setting for a weekend voyage to celebrate Sir Reginald's 60th birthday. The guest list was as select as it was eclectic, a constellation of personalities drawn from the upper echelons of society, each with their own reasons for accepting the invitation. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend of Hercule Poirot, stood on the dock, his suitcase at his feet, adjusting his straw hat against the glare. He had been surprised to receive an invitation from Sir Reginald, whom he had met only once, at a charity gala in London. The note had been gracious, almost insistent, and Hastings, ever susceptible to the lure of a luxurious getaway, had accepted. Besides, he had heard whispers that Poirot himself might be aboard, and the prospect of a weekend in the great detective's company was too tempting to resist. The harbor bustled with activity. Porters scurried about, ferrying luggage onto the yacht, while the guests mingled on the deck, their laughter and chatter carried on the sea breeze. Hastings surveyed the group with a soldier's eye for detail. There was Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's second wife, a statuesque woman in her early 40s with auburn hair and a smile that seemed to conceal as much as it revealed. Beside her stood her stepdaughter, Clara Ashbourne, a pale, sharp-featured young woman of 25, whose eyes darted about as if searching. Colonel Rupert Grayson, a retired military man with a penchant for storytelling and a glass of whiskey perpetually in hand. The crew, under the command of Captain Nathaniel Forbes, a grizzled seafarer with a weathered face, moved with practiced efficiency. The first mate, Thomas Reed, a young man with a boyish grin, directed the loading of provisions, while the stewardess, Mrs. Margaret Henshaw, ensured the cabins were in order. The yacht's chef, Monsieur Pierre Dubois, a Frenchman with a flair for drama, was already barking orders in the galley. As Hastings boarded, he caught sight of a familiar figure at the far end of the deck. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a cream-colored suit and Panama hat, stood gazing out at the sea, his hands clasped behind his back. His mustache, as always, was a work of art, its points sharp enough to rival the yacht's prow. Hastings approached, a grin spreading across his face. "Poirot, old chap, I had a feeling you'd be here," Hastings said, clapping his friend on the shoulder. Poirot turned, his green eyes twinkling with amusement. "Mon ami, you are as predictable as the tides," Did you think Hercule Poirot would decline an invitation to such a charmant gathering? No, no, I am here to observe, to listen, and perhaps to enjoy the fruits of Monsieur Dubois' culinary genius. Hastings chuckled. You've met the chef, then? Mais oui, Poirot replied, his voice tinged with approval. A man of passion, though perhaps too fond of his own voice. But tell me, Hastings, what do you make of our fellow passengers? Hastings glanced at the group, now dispersing to their cabins. A mixed lot, I'd say. Sir Reginald seems a decent sort, but there's a tension about the place. Lady Eleanor and Clara don't seem to get on, and Crane, well, he's got the look of a man who'd sell his own mother for a profit. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. You observe much, my friend, but you do not yet see. There is a current beneath the surface here, a restlessness. I feel it in the air, like the calm before a storm. The yacht's horn sounded, a deep, resonant note that signaled their departure. The sapphire yacht eased away from the dock, its engines humming as it carved a path through the shimmering water. The guests gathered on the deck for a champagne toast, hosted by Sir Reginald himself. He stood at the center of the group, his silver hair catching the sunlight, his voice booming with warmth. My dear friends, he began, raising his glass. This weekend is a celebration of life, of friendship, and of the sea. Let us put aside our cares and revel in the beauty of this moment. The guests murmured their agreement, though Hastings noted the strained smiles on several faces. Clara's glass trembled slightly in her hand, and Victor Crane's eyes flicked toward Sir Reginald, said nothing. But his gaze was everywhere, cataloging every gesture, every glance. Dinner that evening was a lavish affair, served in the yacht's dining salon, a room of dark wood and crystal chandeliers. Monsieur Dubois had outdone himself with a menu of lobster bisque, roasted pheasant, and a dessert of crème brûlée that drew gasps of delight. The conversation flowed, though not without its undercurrents. Lady Eleanor spoke of her charity work with a practiced ease, while Clara remained silent, her eyes fixed on her plate. Victor Crane dominated the table with tales of his financial conquests, though his wife Sylvia seemed to shrink with every word he spoke. Dr. Langston regaled them with medical anecdotes, while Miss Lyle, the novelist, listened with a writer's ear, her pencil occasionally darting to a small notebook. Colonel Grayson, well into his third whiskey, told a rambling story about a campaign in India, which only Poirot seemed to find amusing. As the meal drew to a close, Sir Reginald stood to make another toast. To the Sapphire Yacht, he said, his voice thick with emotion, and to all of you who make this journey unforgettable. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Hastings glanced at Poirot, expecting a wry comment, but the detective's face was unreadable. The party dispersed soon after, some retiring to their cabins, others lingering on the deck to watch the stars emerge. Hastings, feeling the weight of the day, bid Poirot good night and retired to his own cabin, a cozy space with a porthole view of the endless sea. As he drifted off to sleep, lulled by the gentle rocking of the yacht, Hastings could not shake the feeling that Poirot's instincts were correct. There was a storm brewing, not in the sky, but among the souls aboard the Sapphire Yacht. He could only hope that Poirot's little gray cells would be ready when it broke. The night passed uneventfully, or so it seemed. At precisely 7:14 a.m., as documented by the ship's log, the yacht was 120 miles from shore, its position marked by Captain Forbes. The guests began to stir, drawn by the promise of coffee and pastries on the deck. Hastings joined them, expecting to see Poirot already there, analyzing the morning with his usual precision. But Poirot was absent, and a murmur of unease rippled through the group. It was Miss Lyle who first noticed the irregularity. "Has anyone seen Sir Reginald this morning?" she asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. The question hung unanswered. Captain Forbes sent Thomas Reed to check Sir Reginald's cabin, and moments later, the young man, Colonel Grayson, who voiced what they all feared. "Good God," he muttered. "Something's happened to Ashbourne." Hastings felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. He turned, searching for Poirot, and found the detective emerging from below deck, his expression calm, but his eyes alight with purpose. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly, "it appears our little voyage has taken a most unfortunate turn. Hercule Poirot is needed, n'est-ce pas?" And so, the stage was set. A man was missing, blood stained the floor, and the sapphire yacht was far from shore. The mystery had begun, and only Poirot's meticulous mind could unravel it. Chapter 2. The Vanishing of Sir Reginald. The deck of the sapphire yacht buzzed with a nervous energy as the guests gathered, their faces a tableau of shock and suspicion. The morning sun, which should have promised a day of leisure, seemed instead to cast a harsh light on the grim discovery in Sir Reginald Ashbourne's cabin. The blood on the floor, a smear of crimson against the polished wood, had sent a ripple of dread through the party, and the absence of the yacht's owner only deepened the mystery. Hercule Poirot stood slightly apart, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the group with the precision of a watchmaker. Captain Arthur Hastings, still reeling from the news, stood beside Poirot, his mind racing. "Good heavens, Poirot," he whispered. "Do you think he's been murdered?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his disapproval at hasty conclusions. "Patience, mon ami," he murmured. "The blood, it tells a story, but we must read it carefully. Assumptions, they are the fog that obscures the truth." Captain Forbes, the yacht's commander, took charge with a seafarer's authority. His weathered face was grim as he addressed the group. "Ladies and gentlemen, until we know more, I ask you to remain calm. Mr. Reed and I will secure Sir Reginald's cabin, and we'll conduct a thorough search of the yacht. He may simply be indisposed." Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, her auburn hair slightly disheveled, clutched a handkerchief to her lips. "Indisposed?" she said, her voice sharp with indignation. "There's blood in his cabin, Captain. This is no time for euphemisms." Clara Ashbourne, her stepdaughter, stood rigid beside her, her pale face betraying no emotion save a faint tremor in her hands. "Father wouldn't just disappear," she said quietly, almost to herself. "He was particular about his routines." Victor Crane, the financier, snorted derisively. "Particular? The man was a tyrant about his schedules. If he's not here, something's wrong. Very wrong." His wife, Sylvia, clung to his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Indicate an injury, not necessarily foul play. Perhaps Sir Reginald fell, hit his head." Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, raised an eyebrow, her pencil poised over her notebook. "A fall that leaves him missing? That's a curious theory, Doctor." Her tone was polite, but laced with skepticism, and Hastings noted the way her eyes darted to each guest, as if cataloging their reactions. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his whiskey glass absent for once, cleared his throat. "I've seen my share of trouble, and this smells like it. Blood and a missing man don't bode well. Not on a yacht in the middle of nowhere." Poirot, who had remained silent, now raised a hand, commanding attention with the smallest gesture. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice calm but resonant. "Hercule Poirot is not one to leap to conclusions, but neither does he ignore the evidence of his eyes. There is blood, oui, and Sir Reginald is absent. These are facts,
But facts, they are like pieces of a puzzle, meaningless until arranged with order and method. I propose to assist Captain Forbes in his search, and I ask that you all remain here, on the deck, until we return." The guests murmured their assent, though Hastings caught the flicker of unease in their eyes. Poirot's presence, with its air of quiet authority, was both a comfort and a challenge. None wished to appear uncooperative, yet each seemed to guard their own secrets. Poirot and Hastings followed Captain Forbes and Thomas Reed to Sir Reginald's cabin, located on the starboard side of the yacht's upper deck. The cabin was spacious, befitting the yacht's owner, with a large bed, a mahogany desk, and a porthole offering a view of the endless sea. The bloodstain, a jagged smear about a foot long, marred the floor near the desk. Poirot knelt beside it, his gloved fingers hovering just above the surface. "Observe, Hastings," he said, his voice low. "The blood, it is not pooled, but smeared, as if something or someone was dragged. Yet there is no trail leading away. Curious, no?" Hastings frowned, peering at the stain. "You think he was moved?" Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he rose and began a meticulous inspection of the room. The bed was neatly made, the pillows undisturbed. On the desk lay a fountain pen, its cap off, and a sheet of paper with a single line written in Sir Reginald's bold hand. "The truth will out. But at what cost?" Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read it aloud. "A cryptic message," he mused. "Was it written in haste or as a warning? We must consider all possibilities." Captain Forbes, standing by the door, shifted uncomfortably.
Position noted. All normal. Sir Reginald was last seen at dinner, around 9 p.m. last night. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And who saw him last, Monsieur Reed?" Reed hesitated, glancing at Forbes. I believe it was Mrs. Henshaw, the stewardess. She said she brought him a nightcap around 10 p.m. "Bon," Poirot said, nodding. "We shall speak with her. But first let us examine the deck above. If Sir Reginald was moved, there may be traces." The group ascended to the upper deck, where the morning breeze carried the tang of salt. Poirot moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the railings, the deck chairs, the coiled ropes. Near the stern, he paused, crouching to inspect a small dark spot on the teak. "Another stain," he said, beckoning Hastings. "Smaller but consistent with blood. And here," he pointed to a faint scuff mark on the railing. "Something heavy was lifted, perhaps." Hastings felt a chill. "You think he was thrown overboard?" Poirot's expression was unreadable. "It is one possibility, Hastings. But the sea, she keeps her secrets well. We must rely on the secrets of those aboard." Returning to the main deck, Poirot gathered the guests and crew in the dining salon, where the remnants of breakfast lay untouched. Mrs. Margaret Henshaw, the stewardess, was summoned. A stout woman in her 50s, she wore a starched uniform and a look of quiet competence, though her hands twisted nervously as she spoke. "I took Sir Reginald his whiskey at 10 p.m., as I always do," she said. "He was in his cabin, writing at his desk. He seemed preoccupied, but he thanked me and bid me good night." "And you saw nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed. Mrs. Henshaw hesitated. "Well, his door was slightly ajar when I left. I thought he might have opened it for air, but I didn't think much of it." Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. He turned to the guests, his voice deceptively mild. "Mes amis, a man is missing, and there is blood where he should be. I ask each of you, where were you between 10 p.m. and midnight last night?"
The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lady Eleanor spoke first, her voice steady. "I was in my cabin, reading. Clara can confirm, as our cabins adjoin." Clara nodded, though her eyes avoided Poirot's. "Yes, I heard her moving about until I fell asleep around 11. Victor Crane crossed his arms. "Sylvia and I were in our cabin by 10:30. We retired early."
Was weaving. "Merci," he said. "For now, we wait, we watch, and we think. Hercule Poirot does not believe in accidents nor in ghosts. Sir Reginald is somewhere, or was. We shall find him." As the guests dispersed, Hastings leaned close. "What do you make of it, Poirot? Everyone's got an alibi, but that blood—" Poirot smiled faintly. "Alibis, Hastings, are like mirrors. They reflect what we wish to see. But mirrors can be tilted, can they not? Come, we have much to ponder." The Sapphire yacht sailed on, its passengers bound by suspicion, and Poirot's little gray cells were already at work, untangling the knot of lies and secrets that surrounded Sir Reginald's disappearance. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The Sapphire yacht cut through the Channel's glassy waters, its engines a low hum beneath the rising tension among its passengers. The disappearance of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, coupled with the chilling discovery of blood in his cabin, had transformed the luxurious voyage into a floating prison of suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the main deck, watching the horizon, his mind a whirl of questions. He had seen Poirot in action before, but the gravity of this mystery, blood, a missing man, and a confined setting, felt heavier than most. He turned as the familiar figure of Hercule Poirot approached, his cream-colored suit pristine despite the morning's grim events, his mustache as sharp as ever. "Poirot," Hastings said, unable to mask his unease. "This business with Sir Reginald, it's got everyone on edge. Do you really think you can get to the bottom of it?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled with a quiet confidence. "Mon ami, the bottom, as you call it, is precisely where Hercule Poirot excels. The truth, it lies in the details, the small inconsistencies, the hidden motives. We shall find it, but we must proceed with method." Hastings nodded, though his soldier's instinct craved action over deliberation. "Where do we start? The blood, the note, the alibis, there's so much to untangle." "Exactement," Poirot replied, adjusting his Panama hat. "And so, we begin where all good investigations begin, with observation. Let us return to the scene of the crime, and then we shall speak with each of our charmant compagnons." They descended to Sir Reginald's cabin, now cordoned off by Captain Forbes's orders. The bloodstain on the floor remained, a stark reminder of the mystery's violence. Poirot knelt once more, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the smear. "The blood, it is dry now, but not so old. I estimate it was spilled between 10 p.m. and midnight." Someone to believe he did. A note, Hastings, can be a clue or a deception. We must consider both possibilities. He moved to the porthole, which was slightly ajar, and examined its frame. No signs of forced entry here, but the latch is loose. A man could open it from the outside, perhaps, though it would require agility. He turned to the desk, lifting the fountain pen and inspecting its nib. The ink is fresh, the pen uncapped. Sir Reginald was writing when interrupted, n'est-ce pas? But by whom? Captain Forbes joined them, his face etched with worry. "Mr. Poirot, I've had the crew search every inch of the yacht again. No sign of Sir Reginald, and no body. It's as if he vanished into the sea." Poirot raised a finger. The sea, she is vast, but she does not swallow a man without trace. If Sir Reginald is not aboard, we must ask why and how. Tell me, Captain, who had access to this cabin after Mrs. Henshaw's visit at 10 p.m.? Forbes rubbed his chin. No one officially. The crew was on duty, and the guests were in their cabins, or the lounge according to their statements. But the upper deck is accessible, and the cabin doors aren't locked during the day. Tiens, Poirot murmured. An unlocked door is an invitation. We must establish a timeline, precise to the minute. Leaving the cabin, Poirot and Hastings returned to the dining salon, where the guests had been asked to remain. The atmosphere was thick with unease, the earlier camaraderie replaced by wary glances. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly, her handkerchief now a crumpled ball in her hand. Clara stared out a porthole, her expression unreadable. Victor Crane paced near the bar, his wife Sylvia watching him with anxious eyes. Dr. Langston sipped coffee, his calm demeanor a contrast to the tension around him. Miss Beatrice Lyle scribbled in her notebook, her sharp gaze flitting from face to face, while Colonel Grayson nursed a glass of water, his usual whiskey absent. Poirot clapped his hands, drawing their attention. Mesdames et messieurs, the disappearance of Sir Reginald is no accident, nor is it a jest. Hercule Poirot has been asked to assist, and I shall do so with the utmost diligence. I ask each of you to recount your movements last night, with precision. Lies, they will only delay the truth, and the truth, it will emerge. He began with Lady Eleanor, whose voice was steady but cold. As I said, I was in my cabin by 10 p.m. reading. I heard Clara moving about next door until around 11, when I fell asleep. Clara nodded. I hear anything unusual. The yacht's engines drown out most sounds. Sylvia nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes. We were together all night. Dr. Langston set down his coffee cup. I was on deck until 10:45, smoking a cigar. I saw no one but Thomas Reed checking the deck chairs. I went to bed after that. Miss Lyle closed her notebook with a snap. I was in the lounge, writing, until nearly midnight. Colonel Grayson was there until 11, and I saw Mrs. Henshaw pass through around 10:15, after delivering Sir Reginald's nightcap. Grayson nodded. I was in the lounge with Miss Lyle for a bit. Had a drink, then turned in. Didn't hear a thing. Poirot turned to the crew. Thomas Reed, the first mate, shifted nervously. I was on deck duty until 11, then checked the engine room before bed. I saw Dr. Langston, as he said, but no one else. Monsieur Pierre Dubois, the chef, spoke with a flourish. I was in the galley until 10:30, preparing tomorrow's menu. After that, I retired to my quarters. Mrs. Henshaw, the stewardess, repeated her earlier account. I brought Sir Reginald his whiskey at 10. He was at his desk, writing. I left the door ajar, as he liked fresh air. I didn't see him after that. Poirot listened, his head tilted slightly, as if hearing a melody only he could discern. Messy, he said at last. Your accounts, they form a picture, but it is not yet complete. I ask that you remain available for further questions. As the guests dispersed, Hastings leaned close. They're all so composed, Poirot. But someone's lying, aren't they? Poirot smiled faintly. Lying, Hastings? Perhaps. Or perhaps they omit. They conceal. The truth is like a diamond, flawed but brilliant when cut correctly. We must polish it with care.
He led Hastings to the upper deck, where the small bloodstain and scuff mark had been found. Poirot examined the railing again, noting its height. A man of Sir Reginald's stature, 6 feet, robust, would not be easily lifted over this railing. It would require strength or cooperation. Hastings frowned. Cooperation? You mean he went willingly? Or he was already incapacitated, Poirot replied. The blood suggests violence, but the absence of a body, c'est curieux. We must consider the yacht itself, every nook, every cranny. They spent the next hour inspecting the yacht's less accessible areas, the engine room, the stern, pointing at the water. There! Something's floating! The guests and crew rushed to the railing. Bobbing in the yacht's wake was a man's jacket, dark blue, with gold buttons. Unmistakably Sir Reginald's. Captain Forbes ordered the yacht to slow, and Thomas Reed retrieved the jacket with a long pole. It was sodden, but intact, with no visible blood. Poirot examined it closely, noting a torn pocket. "This jacket," he said. "It was not simply lost. It was discarded. But why? And by whom?" The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Poirot, however, seemed almost invigorated. "The plot it thickens, Hastings," he said softly. "But fear not. Hercule Poirot is on the case, and the truth, it cannot hide forever." Chapter 4. The questions begin. The discovery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's jacket, floating in the wake of the Sapphire yacht, cast a pall over the already tense atmosphere aboard. The guests, gathered on the main deck, stared at the sodden garment as it lay draped over a chair, its torn pocket a silent accusation. The sea stretched endlessly around them, a vast, indifferent witness to the unfolding drama. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside Hercule Poirot, his heart heavy with the implications of the find. The jacket suggested a grim fate for Sir Reginald, yet Poirot's calm demeanor hinted at a mind already piecing together the puzzle. "Poirot," Hastings whispered. "That jacket, it's proof something terrible has happened, isn't it? He must have gone overboard." Poirot's green eyes flickered with a hint of reproach. "Proof, mon ami? No, it is evidence, but evidence is not truth until it is understood. This jacket, it tells a story, but we must read between the lines. Why was it discarded? And why the torn pocket? These are questions we must answer." Captain Forbes, his face etched with strain, addressed the group. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a distressing development, but we must remain orderly. The yacht is 150 miles from shore, and I've radioed for assistance. Until help arrives, Mr. Poirot has kindly offered to lead the investigation. I ask for your full cooperation." The guests murmured their assent, though their eyes betrayed suspicion and fear. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, her composure fraying, clutched her stepdaughter Clara's arm. "This is intolerable," she said, her voice sharp. "My husband is missing, and now his jacket is found in the sea. We demand answers." Clara, pale and silent, merely nodded, her gaze fixed on the jacket as if it held secrets she dared not voice.
Maurice Langston, ever the voice of reason, raised a hand. "I agree with Mrs. Crane. Let's not jump to conclusions. The jacket could mean an accident, not murder. Mr. Poirot, what do you propose?" Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, closed her notebook with a deliberate snap. "Yes, Mr. Poirot, what's your next step? You've been awfully quiet." Her tone was curious, but her eyes gleamed with the intensity of a writer scenting a story. "Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual bluster subdued, muttered, "Damned unsettling, all this. Never thought I'd see the day a man vanishes on a yacht." Poirot stepped forward, his small frame commanding the room with an air of quiet authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "Hercule Poirot does not leap to conclusions, nor does he allow fear to cloud his judgment. The jacket, it is a clue, but it is not the whole story. To find Sir Reginald, or what became of him, we must proceed with order and method. I shall interview each of you, alone, in the lounge. We shall discuss your movements, your observations, and perhaps your secrets." A ripple of unease passed through the group, but none dared object. Poirot's reputation preceded him, and his piercing gaze seemed to strip away pretense. He gestured to Hastings. "Mon ami, you will assist me by taking notes. We begin with Lady Eleanor." The interviews took place in the lounge, a room of plush velvet chairs and polished wood, its large windows framing the endless sea. Lady Eleanor sat opposite Poirot, her posture rigid, her auburn hair catching the light. Hastings sat to one side, his notebook open, his pen ready. "Madame," Poirot began, his tone courteous but firm, "you say you were in your cabin from 10 p.m. last night. Did you hear or see anything unusual after Mrs. Henshaw delivered Sir Reginald's nightcap?" Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "As I told you, I was reading. Clara's cabin is next to mine, and I heard her moving about until around 11. I heard nothing from Reginald's cabin, though it's just across the hall." Poirot tilted his head. "And your relationship with your husband, it was harmonious?" Her eyes flashed. "What are you implying, Mr. Poirot?" "Reginald and I were devoted. Of course, every marriage has its moments, but we were content." "Moments?" Poirot pressed, his voice gentle but insistent. Lady Eleanor hesitated, then sighed. "Reginald could be stubborn, especially about business matters."
To bed soon after. Poirot leaned forward. "Upset, mademoiselle. Can you describe the tone?" Clara's eyes flickered with something. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. "He was sharp, like he was arguing with someone, but I didn't hear another voice. I assumed he was on the telephone, though I didn't know we had one aboard." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A telephone, you say? Most interesting. And your relationship with your father?" Clara's gaze dropped. "We were close, but he was disappointed in me. He wanted me to marry well, to secure the family's future. I didn't always agree." Poirot dismissed her gently, his mind clearly turning over her words. Victor Crane was next, his demeanor bristling with impatience. "I've told you, Sylvia and I were in our cabin by 10:30. I didn't hear or see anything. This is a waste of time." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You and Sir Reginald. You had disagreements, no? Lady Eleanor mentioned investments." Crane's jaw tightened. "Reginald was old-fashioned, didn't trust my strategies. We argued, sure, but I didn't kill him, if that's what you're getting at." Sylvia Crane followed, her voice trembling. "We were together all night, as Victor said. I didn't hear anything unusual. I just want this to be over." Dr. Langston was more forthcoming, his tone professional. "I was on deck until 10:45, smoking. I saw Thomas Reed, and I thought I glimpsed someone near the stern, but it was dark. Could have been a crew member." Miss Lyle, ever observant, recounted her evening in the lounge.
I saw Mrs. Henshaw at 10:15 and Colonel Grayson until 11. I heard footsteps on the deck above around 10:30, but I couldn't say who it was. Colonel Grayson confirmed her account, adding, I was a bit in my cups, but I didn't hear any commotion. Went to bed and slept like a log. The crew followed. Thomas Reed repeated his deck duties, mentioning he'd seen Dr. Langston, but no one else. Monsieur Pierre Dubois, the chef, insisted he'd been in the galley until 10:30, then retired. Mrs. Henshaw, the stewardess, grew flustered under Poirot's gaze. I swear, I left Sir Reginald at 10. His store was ajar, but I didn't see anyone else. Poirot concluded the interviews, his expression thoughtful. He and Hastings stepped onto the deck, where the sea breeze offered a brief respite from the tension. What do you make of it, Poirot? Hastings asked. Everyone's alibi seemed to hold. But that jacket... Poirot's eyes gleamed. Alibis, Hastings, are like a house of cards.
Speaking to someone. We must investigate this further. They returned to Sir Reginald's cabin, where Poirot examined the desk again. Beneath a blotter, he found a small key, its surface scratched. A key, Hastings, he said, holding it up. But to what? A safe, perhaps? Or a locked drawer? They searched the cabin but found no matching lock. Poirot pocketed the key, his mind clearly racing. As they left, Captain Forbes approached, his face grim. Mr. Poirot, we've found something else, in the storage hold. A rope, knotted oddly, with traces of blood. Poirot's eyes lit up. Show me, Captain. In the hold, the rope lay coiled near the crates Poirot had noted earlier. The blood was faint, but unmistakable. This rope, Poirot said. It was used to move something heavy, perhaps Sir Reginald himself. Hastings felt a chill. You think he was tied up and thrown overboard? Poirot's expression was grave. It is possible, Hastings, but the jacket, the rope, the key, these are pieces of a puzzle that does not yet fit. We must dig deeper, into the hearts and minds of those aboard. As the yacht sailed on, the mystery deepened, and Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, unraveling the web of lies and secrets that bound the Sapphire yacht to its dark fate. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The Sapphire yacht glided through the channel, its serene exterior a stark contrast to the storm of suspicion brewing within. The discovery of Sir Reginald Ashburn's jacket and the blood-stained rope in the storage hold had heightened the tension among the guests, each of whom now eyed the others with a mix of fear and distrust. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the main deck, his mind grappling with the mounting evidence. The blood, the note, the jacket, the rope, each clue seemed to point to foul play. Yet the absence of a body left the mystery maddeningly incomplete. Beside him, Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the horizon, though Hastings knew his friend's thoughts were far from the sea. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. That rope, it's damning, isn't it? Someone tied up Sir Reginald, maybe dragged him to the railing. But who, and why no body? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his impatience with hasty conclusions. Mon ami, you see the rope and think of violence, which is natural. But Hercule Poirot, he thinks of intention. The rope, the jacket, these are not accidents. They are placed, perhaps, to lead us astray. We must beware the red herring, Hastings, for it swims in these waters. Hastings frowned. A red herring? You mean someone's trying to mislead us? Précisément, Poirot replied, turning to face him. The evidence, it is too convenient. A jacket in the sea, a rope with blood. These suggest a narrative. But is it the true one? We must... And Captain Forbes had ordered the guests to remain in the dining salon while the crew conducted another search of the yacht. The atmosphere was stifling, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne sat with her hands folded, her face a mask of controlled grief. Clara, her stepdaughter, stared at the table, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on its surface. Victor Crane paced near the bar, his sharp features taut with irritation, while Sylvia, his wife, sat quietly, her eyes darting nervously to her husband. Dr. Maurice Langston sipped tea, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension around him. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, scribbled in her notebook, her keen eyes missing nothing. Colonel Rupert Grayson, unusually sober, leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. Poirot entered the salon, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured. "The situation, it grows more complex. The rope in the hold, the jacket in the sea, these are pieces of a puzzle, but they do not yet form a picture. I ask you now to consider, what did you see or hear last night that you have not yet shared? Even the smallest detail. It may be the key." Victor Crane stopped pacing, his voice sharp. "This is ridiculous, Poirot. You're fishing for something that doesn't exist. The jacket proves it. Reginald went overboard, probably drunk or disoriented. Why complicate things?" Lady Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Drunk? My husband was not a man to lose control, Mr. Crane. If he's gone, someone made sure of it." Clara's head snapped up, her voice trembling. "Don't say that, Eleanor. Father he was careful. He wouldn't just fall." Poirot's gaze moved from one to the other, his expression unreadable. "Madame, mademoiselle, your passion, it is noted. But let us focus on facts. Monsieur Crane, you suggest an accident, yet the blood in Sir Reginald's cabin, it speaks of violence. And the rope, knotted, blood-stained, suggests intent. Do you maintain you heard nothing unusual last night?" Crane's jaw tightened. "I told you, Sylvia and I were in our cabin. The engines mask most sounds. You're barking up the wrong tree." Sylvia nodded, her voice barely audible. "It's true. We didn't hear anything." Poirot turned to Dr. Langston. "You, monsieur, were on deck until 10:45. You mentioned seeing a figure near the stern. Can you describe it further?" Langston set down his teacup, his brow furrowing. "Nerves lately. I saw him at dinner, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. Probably business troubles." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Business troubles, Colonel? You knew Sir Reginald well?" Grayson shrugged. "Met him a few times at the club. He was always fretting about investments, especially with Crane breathing down his neck." Crane's face reddened, but before he could retort, Poirot raised a hand. "Enough, messieurs. We shall return to motives later. For now, I wish to examine the rope more closely. Captain Forbes, if you please." Forbes led Poirot, Hastings, and Dr. Langston to the storage hold, where the rope lay coiled. It was thick, nautical, with a series of tight knots and faint bloodstains along one section. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the knots. "These are not sailor's knots," he said, glancing at Forbes. "They are clumsy, improvised. Whoever tied them was not skilled in such matters." Forbes nodded. "My crew uses standard knots. Bollins, hitches. These are amateurish." Dr. Langston examined the bloodstains. "The blood is minimal, Mr. Poirot. It could be from a superficial wound, not necessarily fatal, but the quantity suggests it wasn't a major injury." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Interessant. A superficial wound, yet Sir Reginald is gone. And the jacket, with its torn pocket, perhaps it caught on something during a struggle. Hastings frowned. A struggle. But where's the body, Poirot? If he was attacked, there'd be more blood, surely. Poirot rose, dusting his hands. The body, Hastings, is the great question. But let us consider another possibility. What if the body was never meant to be found? The jacket, the rope, these may be distractions, designed to make us believe Sir Reginald is in the sea. Forbes looked skeptical. You think he's still aboard, Mr. Poirot? I think nothing yet, Poirot replied. I observe, I question, I deduce. And now we shall question the crew more closely. They returned to the deck, where Thomas Reed, the first mate, waited nervously. Poirot fixed him with a piercing stare. Monsieur Reed, you were on deck until 11 o'clock. Did you see or hear anything near Sir Reginald's cabin? Reed shifted, his boyish grin absent. No, sir. I was checking the deck chairs, as Dr. Langston said. Minutes later. I assumed it was one of the guests. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A door closing. Most interesting. And you, Monsieur Dubois? The chef, Pierre Dubois, puffed out his chest. I was in the galley, as I said. I heard nothing, saw nothing. My art, it demands focus. Poirot dismissed the crew, his mind clearly racing. He and Hastings walked to the stern, where the jacket had been spotted. Poirot examined the railing again, noting the scuff mark. This mark, he said. It is too high for a jacket to catch. It suggests something heavier. Perhaps a body was lifted. Hastings felt a chill. You're back to the idea he was thrown overboard? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps we are meant to think so. The rope, the jacket, these are arrows pointing to the sea. But I suspect the truth lies closer. As they returned to the salon, a shout came from the lounge. It was Miss Lyle, holding a small object, a gold cufflink engraved with the initials R.A. I found this under a chair, she said, her voice sharp. It's Sir Reginald's, isn't it? The guests gathered, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Poirot took the cufflink, his eyes gleaming. A clue, Mademoiselle Lyle, and a timely one. This cufflink, it was not in the cabin. It suggests Sir Reginald was here, in the lounge, after dinner. But who was with him? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the sapphire yacht sailed on, its secrets growing darker with every mile. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The sapphire yacht pressed onward through the channel, its polished exterior belying the turmoil within. The discovery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's gold cufflink in the lounge had ignited fresh suspicion among the guests, each of whom now seemed to guard their words with renewed caution. The cufflink, engraved with the initials R.A., lay in Hercule Poirot's gloved hand. A small but weighty piece of evidence that suggested Sir Reginald had been in the lounge after dinner, contradicting several alibis. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside his friend,
his mind racing with the implications. The blood, the rope, the jacket, and now this cufflink. Each clue seemed to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Poirot,
The cufflink, with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Victor Crane leaned against the bar, his sharp features set in a scowl, while Sylvia, his wife, sat hunched, her eyes avoiding the group. Dr. Maurice Langston maintained his professional calm, though his fingers tapped a restless rhythm on his teacup. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, watched the scene with her usual intensity, her pencil poised over her notebook. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey replaced by a glass of water, looked unusually subdued. Poirot held up the cufflink, letting it catch the light. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "This cufflink, found by Mademoiselle Lyle under a chair in the lounge, belongs to Sir Reginald. It places him there after dinner, a fact that contradicts certain accounts. I ask you now, who saw Sir Reginald in the lounge after 9 p.m.? A heavy silence followed. Victor Crane broke it, his tone impatient. "This is absurd, Poirot. The cufflink could have fallen off earlier. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A molehill, Monsieur Crane? No. Hercule Poirot does not deal in molehills. The cufflink is polished, undamaged, and was found in a place where Sir Reginald was not known to be. It suggests he was in the lounge, perhaps in conversation or confrontation. You, monsieur, were in your cabin by 10:30, you say. But before that?" Crane's eyes narrowed. "I told you, Sylvia and I were together after dinner. We didn't go near the lounge." Sylvia nodded, her voice barely audible. "That's right, we went straight to our cabin." Poirot turned to Miss Lyle, who had found the cufflink. "Mademoiselle, you were in the lounge until nearly midnight, writing. You saw Colonel Grayson until 11, and Mrs. Henshaw passing through at 10:15. Did you see or hear Sir Reginald?" Miss Lyle's eyes flicked to her notebook as if consulting her own observations. "No, Mr. Poirot, I didn't see him. But those footsteps I heard above the lounge around 10:30, they were heavy, like a man's. I assumed it was Sir Reginald, as he often paced when troubled, but I can't be certain." Colonel Grayson cleared his throat. "I was in the lounge until 11, as Miss Lyle said. Didn't see Ashbourne, though. He was at dinner, looking like he'd swallowed a wasp, but I didn't see him after." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Clara. "Mademoiselle Ashbourne, you heard your father's voice at 9:30, sounding agitated. You thought he was on a telephone, yet there is—"
Lady Eleanor's lips tightened.
"I've told you. I was in my cabin, reading. I heard nothing from Reginald's cabin after dinner. If he was in the lounge, I didn't know." Poirot's eyes lingered on her, but he moved on to Dr. Langston. "You saw a figure near the stern at 10:45, monsieur. Could it have been Sir Reginald?" Langston frowned, his fingers pausing on his teacup. "It was too dark to say, Mr. Poirot. The figure was tall, moving quickly. I thought it was a crew member, but it could have been anyone." Poirot pocketed the cufflink, his expression thoughtful. "Merci. We shall return to this later. For now, I wish to examine the lounge where the cufflink was found." He led Hastings to the lounge, a cozy room with deep armchairs, a small bar, and a large window overlooking the sea. The chair under which Miss Lyle had found the cufflink was upholstered in green velvet, its legs slightly scuffed. Poirot knelt, examining the floor. "Observe, Hastings," he said,
pointing to a faint scratch near the chair. "This mark, it is recent. Perhaps the chair was moved, or something was dropped." Hastings squinted. "You think the cufflink was planted?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Planted, misplaced, or lost in a struggle. These are all possibilities. But the cufflink, it is too convenient, too perfectly placed. We must consider why it was left here." They searched the lounge, finding little else of note save a faint smudge on the bar counter, a trace of what looked like ink. Poirot examined it closely, his eyes narrowing. "Ink, Hastings, like that on Sir Reginald's pen. Perhaps he was here writing before his disappearance." Hastings frowned. "But the note was in his cabin. Why would he write here?" "An excellent question," Poirot said. "Perhaps he was interrupted in his cabin and came here to continue. Or perhaps someone wished us to believe so." They returned to the deck where Captain Forbes awaited with news. "Mr. Poirot, we found something else in the hold. A piece of cloth caught on a crate. It matches the fabric of Sir Reginald's jacket." Poirot followed Forbes to the hold, where the cloth, a small, dark blue scrap with a gold thread, lay beside the blood-stained rope. "This," Poirot said, holding it up, "confirms the jacket was in the hold before it reached the sea. But why move it? And why tear the pocket?" Hastings felt a chill. "You're saying someone staged this? Threw the jacket overboard to make us think Sir Reginald drowned?" Poirot nodded. "It is possible, Hastings. The cufflink, the rope."
"You see this cloth or the rope?" Reed's face paled. "No, sir. I was in the hold around 11. But I didn't notice anything unusual. Just crates and supplies." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet the crate was moved and the cloth was caught. You are certain you saw nothing?" Reed swallowed hard. I might have missed it, sir. It was dark and I was in a hurry." Poirot dismissed him, then turned to Mrs. Henshaw. "Madam, you passed through the lounge at 10:15. Did you see Sir Reginald or anyone else?" Mrs. Henshaw's hands trembled. "No, Mr. Poirot. The lounge was empty except for Miss Lyle. But I did notice a glass on the bar, half full of whiskey. I thought it odd, as Sir Reginald usually drank in his cabin." Poirot's eyes lit up. "A glass of whiskey. Most interesting. And where is this glass now?" Mrs. Henshaw hesitated. "I cleared it away, sir. It's in the galley, washed." Poirot sighed, a rare sign of frustration. "A pity, madam. But no matter, the mind of Hercule Poirot, it retains what the hands discard." As they left the hold, Hastings leaned close. "Poirot, this is getting murkier. The cufflink, the cloth, the whiskey glass. Someone's playing a game, aren't they?" Poirot smiled faintly. "A game, Hastings, but one with high stakes. The red herrings. They swim in schools, but the truth, it is a solitary fish. We shall catch it, with patience and precision." The yacht sailed on, its passengers bound by suspicion, and Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, sifting through the clues to uncover the truth hidden in the details. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The Sapphire yacht sailed steadily through the English Channel, its polished decks bathed in the pale light of a cloudy afternoon. The discovery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's cufflink in the lounge, the blood-stained rope in the hold, and the torn scrap of his jacket had tightened the web of suspicion around the passengers and crew. Each new clue seemed to pull the mystery into sharper focus, yet the absence of Sir Reginald, or his body, kept the truth tantalizingly out of reach. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the stern, the sea breeze ruffling his hair, his mind a tumult of questions. Beside him, Hercule Poirot stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the horizon, as if it held answers the yacht concealed. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with frustration. "We've got a cufflink, a rope, a scrap of cloth, and a missing man. It's as if
Gallery of unease. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne sat with her shoulders squared, her auburn hair immaculate despite the strain in her eyes. Clara, her stepdaughter, stared at her hands, her pale fingers twisting a handkerchief. Victor Crane leaned against the bar, his sharp features set in a scowl, while Sylvia, his wife, sat hunched, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Maurice Langston sipped tea, his calm demeanor a facade that seemed to fray at the edges. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, scribbled in her notebook, her keen gaze flitting from face to face. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual bluster subdued, clutched a glass of water, his eyes distant. Poirot stepped forward, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "The evidence mounts, yet the truth remains elusive. The cufflink in the lounge, the rope in the hold, the cloth from Sir Reginald's jacket. These suggest a story, but not the whole story. I sense there are secrets among you, secrets that weigh heavy. Now is the time to speak, before the net tightens." Victor Crane snorted, his voice cutting. "Secrets? You're grasping at straws, Poirot. The jacket was in the sea. Reginald's gone. Why waste time with this charade?" Lady Eleanor's eyes flashed. "A charade, Mr. Crane. My husband is missing, perhaps dead, and you dismiss it. I wonder what you're hiding with your bluster." Crane's face reddened, but before he could retort, Clara spoke, her voice soft but piercing. "Stop it, both of you. Father, he wasn't himself lately. He was worried, secretive. I heard him arguing with someone days before we sailed, in his study at home. I don't know who, but it was heated." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "An argument, mademoiselle. This is most significant. Can you recall any words, any tone?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "I only caught fragments, something about debts and promises broken." Father sounded. "Betrayed." Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "Clara, why didn't you mention this before? If Reginald was in trouble, I should have known." Clara's gaze dropped. "I didn't want to worry you, and I thought it was just business." Poirot turned to Victor Crane. "Monsieur, you and Sir Reginald had disagreements over investments, non? Could this argument have been with you?" Crane's jaw clenched. "I told you. We argued about strategy, not debts. Reginald was stubborn, but I didn't betray." Dr. Langston, you, monsieur, mentioned a figure near the stern at 10:45. Could it have been someone carrying something heavy, perhaps? Langston frowned, his fingers pausing on his teacup. It's possible, Mr. Poirot. The figure moved quickly, but it was dark. I couldn't see details. Miss Lyle closed her notebook with a snap. I heard those footsteps above the lounge at 10:30, as I said. They were heavy, purposeful. If Sir Reginald was in the lounge, perhaps he went to the deck afterward. Colonel Grayson nodded. Could be. Ashbourne was always pacing when he was agitated. I saw him at dinner, looking like a man with the weight of the world on him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And what weight, Colonel? You mentioned his business troubles. Did he confide in you? Grayson shifted uncomfortably. Not exactly, but at the club he'd mutter about bad decisions and trusting the wrong people. I figured it was about Crane or some other financier.
Crane's fist clenched, but Poirot raised a hand, forestalling an outburst. Merci. We shall return to this. For now, I wish to examine the lounge again, with particular attention to the bar. Poirot and Hastings moved to the lounge, where the green velvet chair and the bar counter awaited scrutiny. Poirot examined the smudge of ink on the bar, his gloved fingers hovering over it. "This ink," he said. "It matches the pen in Sir Reginald's cabin. But why right here and not there? And the whiskey glass Mrs. Henshaw mentioned. Its absence is telling." Hastings frowned. "You think the glass was important?" "Everything is important, Hastings," Poirot replied. "A glass, a cufflink, a scrap of cloth. These are the threads of our tapestry. We must weave them carefully." They returned to the deck, where Captain Forbes approached, his face grim. "Mr. Poirot, we found something else. In the crew's quarters. A notebook, hidden under Thomas Reed's bunk. It's got Sir Reginald's initials on it." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Show me, Captain." In the crew's quarters, a cramped space below deck, Forbes handed Poirot a small leather notebook, its cover embossed with R.A. The pages were filled with numbers, dates, and cryptic notes. V.C. owes 50,000, due 8/25, and E must not know. Poirot's fingers traced the entries, his mind racing. "This," he said, "is alleged."
The crates. I meant to give it to Captain Forbes, but I forgot.
Poirot's gaze was piercing.
Forgot, Monsieur Reed. Or did you keep it for another purpose? You were in the hold, near the rope and the cloth. What did you see?
Reed's face flushed.
Nothing, sir. I was checking supplies like I said. I saw the notebook, picked it up, and I got busy.
Poirot dismissed him, but his expression was thoughtful.
The notebook. It is another clue, or another red herring. We must verify its contents.
They returned to the salon, where Poirot confronted Victor Crane.
Monsieur, this notebook suggests you owed Sir Reginald a significant sum. Care to explain?
Crane's face darkened.
That's nonsense. I owed him nothing. If there's a debt, it's fabricated, or someone else's.
Lady Eleanor's voice cut in, sharp and cold.
If Reginald was hiding debts, he didn't tell me. But I knew he was troubled. He'd been distant for weeks, secretive.
Clara's eyes filled with tears.
He was protecting us, wasn't he? From whatever this was.
Poirot's gaze softened.
Perhaps, mademoiselle, but protection can be a heavy burden. We shall see.
As the yacht sailed on, the lies surfaced, each revelation a crack in the facade of civility. Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, sifting through the secrets to uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The sapphire yacht pressed forward through the English Channel, its sleek form slicing through the waves under a sky heavy with clouds. The air aboard was thick with suspicion, each guest and crew member now a potential suspect in the disappearance of Sir Reginald Ashbourne. The mounting clues, the blood in his cabin, the jacket in the sea, the blood-stained rope, the cufflink in the lounge, and now the cryptic notebook found in Thomas Reed's quarters, had woven a tapestry of deceit that seemed to tighten around the passengers. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the main deck, the sea breeze doing little to ease the knot in his stomach. Beside him, Hercule Poirot stood with an air of quiet intensity, his green eyes scanning the horizon as if it might yield the final piece of the puzzle. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "that notebook, it's explosive. If Crane owed Sir Reginald money, that's a motive. But Reed having it, that's suspicious. Do you think he's involved?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his careful consideration. "Mon ami, the notebook, it is like a mirror. It reflects what someone wishes us to see, but mirrors can distort. We must look beyond the reflection to the truth. The emotions, Hastings, they are rising to the surface."
Clara,
Her stepdaughter clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed and distant. Victor Crane stood near the bar, his sharp features taut with anger, while Sylvia, his wife, sat hunched, her delicate frame trembling. Dr. Maurice Langston maintained his professional calm, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, scribbled in her notebook, her keen gaze darting from face to face. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey replaced by a glass of water, looked weary, as if the weight of the mystery had sapped his bluster. Poirot stepped forward, his small frame commanding the room with an effortless authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth but firm. "The clues, they accumulate, yet the truth remains hidden. The notebook, found in Monsieur Reed's quarters, suggests debts and secrets. But secrets, they are like shadows. They grow long in the light of scrutiny. I ask you now, who among you knows of Sir Reginald's financial troubles? Speak, for silence only delays the inevitable." Victor Crane's voice cut through the silence, sharp and defensive. "I've had enough of this, Poirot. That notebook's a plant or a mistake. I owed Reginald nothing. If anyone's hiding something, it's not me." Lady Eleanor's eyes flashed. "How dare you, Mr. Crane? My husband was a man of honor. If he wrote of debts, he had reason. Perhaps you were pressuring him, as you always did." Clara's head snapped up, her voice trembling, but resolute. "Stop it, both of you. Father he was scared. I saw it in his eyes at dinner. He knew something was wrong, and now he's gone." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her handkerchief, a sob escaping her lips. The room fell silent, the weight of Clara's outburst hanging in the air. Sylvia Crane reached out, her hand trembling as she touched Clara's arm. "Clara, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. I know what it's like to feel helpless." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained steady. "Mademoiselle Ashbourne, your grief, it is sincere, and it tells me much. You say your father was scared. Did he confide in you? Perhaps. About his fears?" Clara shook her head, her voice muffled. "No, he didn't. But the day before we sailed, he gave me a letter. He told me to keep it safe and open it only if something happened to him. I thought he was being dramatic, but now—"
"This mystery." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. Poirot carefully opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper. He read silently, his expression unreadable, then folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. "This letter," he said, "it confirms certain suspicions. But for now, it remains between us. Merci, mademoiselle." Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Mr. Poirot, what does it say? I'm his wife. I have a right to know." Poirot raised a hand. "In time, madame. The letter, it speaks of trust and betrayal, but it is not yet complete. We must proceed with care." Victor Crane stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. "You're playing games, Poirot. If that letter implicates anyone, it's not me. I suggest you look at the crew. Reed, for instance. That notebook was in his quarters." Thomas Reed, standing near the door, flushed red. "I told you I found it in the hold. I didn't steal it, and I didn't hurt Sir Reginald." Poirot's gaze turned to Reed, piercing and calm. "Monsieur Reed, your agitation, it is noted. But tell me, when you found the notebook, was it alone or with something else?" Reed hesitated, his eyes darting to Captain Forbes. It was tucked between two crates near the rope. I didn't see anything else, I swear." Poirot nodded, then turned to Mrs. Henshaw, the stewardess, who stood quietly by the bar.
Madame, you mentioned a whiskey glass in the lounge. Half full. Can you describe it further? Mrs. Henshaw's hands twisted nervously. It was one of Sir Reginald's crystal glasses from his cabin. I thought it odd, as he rarely drank in the lounge. It had a faint smudge on the rim. Lipstick, maybe. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Lipstick. This is most interesting. And who among the ladies wears lipstick? Lady Eleanor touched her lips instinctively. I do, but I wasn't in the lounge. Sylvia wears it too, don't you? Sylvia's face paled. Yes, but I wasn't there either. Victor and I were in our cabin. Poirot's gaze lingered on Sylvia, but he moved on to Miss Lyle. Mademoiselle, you were in the lounge until midnight. Did you see this glass? Miss Lyle nodded slowly. Yes, I noticed it on the bar around 10:30. I thought it was left.
Poirot, what did it say? It's got you thinking, hasn't it? Poirot's lips curved slightly. It says much, Hastings, but not enough. It speaks of a betrayal, of a secret kept from Lady Eleanor, and of a plan to confront someone aboard this yacht. But it does not name the traitor. We must dig deeper. They returned to the lounge, where Poirot examined the bar counter again, focusing on the spot where the ink smudge had been found. This ink, he said, it matches the pen in Sir Reginald's cabin, and the lipstick on the glass. Perhaps it belongs to someone who met him here, in secret. Hastings frowned. A secret meeting? With whom? Sylvia? Lady Eleanor? Or another? Poirot said. We must consider all possibilities. The emotional weight. It is heavy here. Clara's grief, Sylvia's fear, Crane's anger. These are clues as vital as the cufflink or the rope. As they left the lounge, Captain Forbes approached, his face grim. Mr. Poirot, we found something else. A small vial in the galley, hidden behind a canister. It smells like chloroform. Poirot's eyes lit up. Chloroform? Tiens, this changes the picture. A man does not vanish without struggle, unless he is subdued. Show me, Captain. In the galley, the vial, a small glass bottle with a faint chemical odor, lay on the counter. Poirot examined it carefully, his mind racing. This, he said, suggests Sir Reginald was incapacitated. But by whom? And where is he now? The yacht sailed on, its passengers bound by secrets, and Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the emotional cracks that would lead to the truth. Chapter 9. The Trap. The sapphire yacht glided through the English Channel, its serene motion a stark contrast to the storm of suspicion brewing within its polished confines. The discovery of the chloroform vial in the galley had added a sinister layer to the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's disappearance, suggesting not only violence but premeditation. The blood in his cabin, the jacket in the sea, the blood-stained rope, the cufflink in the lounge, the cryptic notebook, and now the vial. Each clue tightened the net around the passengers and crew. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the main deck, the sea breeze sharp against his face, his mind reeling from the mounting evidence. Beside him, Hercule Poirot stood with an air of quiet determination, his green eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice tinged with urgency. That chloroform, it's proof of foul play, isn't it? Someone drugged Sir Reginald, maybe to move him without a struggle. But who? And where is he? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his careful calculation. Mon ami, the chloroform, it is a significant piece of the puzzle, but it does not yet complete the picture. It suggests a plan. But also a mistake. Whoever used it left the vial to be found, a careless act, or perhaps a deliberate one. Tonight we shall set a trap to see who squirms. Hastings frowned, intrigued. A trap? What do you have in mind? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Patience, Hastings. The mind of Hercule Poirot. It works like a spider's web. Delicate, precise, and inescapable. We shall gather our suspects, apply pressure, and observe. The guilty, they will reveal themselves through their actions, their words, their silences. The guests and crew were summoned to the dining salon as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a golden glow. The atmosphere was electric with tension, each face a mask of apprehension or defiance. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne sat with her hands clasped, her auburn hair catching the light, her eyes sharp with suppressed emotion. Clara, her stepdaughter, sat beside her, her pale face etched with grief, her handkerchief crumpled in her fist. Victor Crane stood near the bar, his sharp features set in a scowl, while Sylvia, his wife, sat hunched, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Maurice Langston maintained his professional calm, though his fingers betrayed a slight tremor. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, closed her notebook with a snap, her keen gaze scanning the room. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey absent, looked weary, his shoulders slumped. The crew, Captain Forbes, Thomas Reed, Mrs. Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois, stood near the door, their expressions a mix of unease and deference. Poirot stepped to the disappearance grows darker with each discovery. The blood, the jacket, the rope, the cufflink, the notebook, and now a vial of chloroform. These are not accidents, but threads in a tapestry of deceit. Tonight, Hercule Poirot sets a trap. I shall reveal a theory, and I ask you to listen carefully. For your reactions, they will speak louder than your words. A murmur of unease rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Let us consider the facts. Sir Reginald was last seen at 10 p.m. by Mrs. Henshaw, in his cabin, writing. A bloodstain was found there, smeared, as if something or someone was dragged. A jacket, his jacket, was found in the sea, with a torn pocket. A rope, blood-stained, was found in the hold, near a scrap of his jacket. A cufflink, engraved with his initials, was found in the lounge, suggesting he was there after dinner. A notebook, detailing debts, was found in Monsieur Reed's quarters. And now, a vial of chloroform, hidden in the galley, suggests Sir Reginald was subdued before his disappearance. These clues, they point to a crime, but also to a deception. Victor Crane's voice cut through the silence, sharp and impatient. Get to the point, Poirot. What's your theory? Who do you think did it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Patience, Monsieur Crane. I propose this. Sir Reginald was engaged in a secret meeting in the lounge. After dinner, he was writing, perhaps, when he was interrupted. A struggle ensued, during which his cufflink fell and his jacket's pocket tore. He was subdued with chloroform, tied with the rope, and moved to the hold. There his jacket was removed, and it, or he, was cast into the sea. The notebook, it suggests a motive, debts, betrayal, perhaps a confrontation gone wrong. But the question remains, who had the means, the motive, and the opportunity? Lady Eleanor's face paled. You're saying my husband was murdered, and one of us did it. Clara's voice trembled, her eyes filling with tears. No, it can't be true. Father, he wouldn't have let this happen. Sylvia Crane clutched her husband's arm, her voice barely audible. Victor, tell them you had nothing to do with it. Crane shook her off, his face red with anger. I've told you, I was in our cabin.
Know how that vial got there. Pierre Dubois puffed out his chest. The galley is my domain, Monsieur Poirot. I saw nothing but my pots and pans. This vial, it is not mine. Poirot's eyes moved to Dr. Langston. You, monsieur, are a physician. Chloroform is a tool of your trade, no? Could you have misplaced such a vial? Langston's calm cracked, his voice sharp. I resent the implication, Mr. Poirot. I carry no such thing on a pleasure cruise. My medical bag is open for inspection. Poirot nodded, then turned to Miss Lyle. Mademoiselle, you heard footsteps above the lounge at 10:30. You found the cufflink. Have you observed anything else? Perhaps a glance, a gesture that seemed out of place? Miss Lyle's eyes narrowed, her voice measured. I've noticed many things, Mr. Poirot. Sylvia's been nervous since we boarded, more so since the jacket was found. And Mr. Crane, he's quick to anger, but there's fear behind it. I'm a writer. I see these things. Sylvia gasped, her face paling, while Crane's fist clenched. You're a meddling busybody, Miss Lyle, he snapped. Keep your nose out of my business. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the tension. Enough. I have laid my trap, and I see the reactions. Fear, anger, grief, these are the colors of truth. But one of you knows more than you say. I give you this chance. Come to me privately, before midnight, and confess what you know. The net, it tightened. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, their composure fraying. Clara rose, her voice breaking. Mr. Poirot, please, find my father. I can't bear this. Poirot placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle, Hercule Poirot keeps his promises. The truth, it will be found. As the group dispersed, Hastings leaned close. That was your trap, Poirot? Stirring them up to see who cracks? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Precisement, Hastings. The guilty. They feel the pressure most. Tonight someone will act, perhaps to confess, perhaps to cover their tracks. We shall watch, and we shall listen. They returned to the deck, where the stars were beginning to emerge. Poirot examined the railing near the stern, where the scuff mark and faint bloodstain had been found. This mark, he said, it is too precise for a struggle. Perhaps it was made to mislead us, like the jacket. Hastings frowned. You think it's all a
fever pitch, the passengers and crew bound by a web of suspicion woven from blood, a discarded jacket, a knotted rope, a cufflink, a cryptic notebook, and a vial of chloroform. Hercule Poirot's trap, set in the dining salon hours earlier, had stirred the pot, and now the air crackled with anticipation. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside his friend on the main deck, the cool night breeze doing little to ease the knot in his chest. Poirot, immaculate in his cream-colored suit, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had glimpsed the truth. Poirot, Hastings whispered, his voice taut. Your trap worked, didn't it? Someone's going to crack tonight, but who? And what really happened to Sir Reginald? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his quiet satisfaction. Mon ami, the trap. It is not just to catch the guilty, but to reveal the truth. The clues, they have spoken, and Hercule Poirot has listened. Tonight, we shall gather our suspects, and the tapestry of this mystery will be complete. Hastings frowned, his mind racing through the evidence. The chloroform, the notebook, the cufflink. It all points to a planned attack, but the body's still missing. How do you explain that? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Patience, Hastings. The absence of a body. It is the greatest clue of all. Come, we return to the salon, where the truth will be unveiled. The guests and crew were assembled in the dining salon, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the chandeliers. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne sat with her auburn hair perfectly arranged, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of dread. Clara, her stepdaughter, clutched her handkerchief, her pale face etched with grief. Victor Crane stood near the bar, his sharp features set in a scowl, while Sylvia, his wife, sat hunched, her hands trembling. Dr. Maurice Langston sipped a glass of water, his calm demeanor fraying at the edges. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, closed her notebook, her keen eyes watching Poirot with anticipation. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey absent, looked weary, his shoulders slumped. The crew, Captain Forbes, Thomas Reed, Mrs. Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois, stood near the door, their expressions a mix of unease and curiosity. Poirot stepped to the center of the room, his small frame commanding absolute silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "The mystery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's disappearance is no longer a mystery. Hercule Poirot has used his
Dragged. His jacket was found in the sea with a torn pocket. A blood-stained rope was found in the hold, near a scrap of his jacket. A cufflink, engraved with his initials, was found in the lounge. A notebook, detailing debts, was found in Monsieur Reed's quarters. A vial of chloroform was found in the galley, and a letter, written by Sir Reginald to his daughter Clara, spoke of betrayal and a confrontation. These clues, they tell a story, but not the one you expect. Victor Crane's voice cut in, sharp and impatient. "Get on with it, Poirot. Who killed him? Where's the body?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Crane, your impatience, it is telling. But let us proceed with order and method. The blood in the cabin was not enough for a fatal wound, as Dr. Langston confirmed. The chloroform suggests Sir Reginald was subdued, not killed. The jacket in the sea, the rope, the cufflink, these were meant to make us believe he was thrown overboard. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in the obvious. Sir Reginald is not dead. He is alive, and he is aboard this yacht." A collective gasp filled the room. Clara's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "Alive? Mr. Poirot, how can that be?" Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle, your father's letter spoke of a plan to confront a betrayer. He suspected someone aboard was plotting against him, someone who owed him money, who sought to ruin him. That someone is Victor Crane." Crane's face reddened, his fist clenching. "This is outrageous. I owed him nothing. That notebook's a lie." Poirot raised a hand. "The notebook, it is genuine, but it was placed in Monsieur Reed's quarters to cast suspicion. Sir Reginald, he knew of your debts, Monsieur Crane, and your attempts to manipulate his investments. He planned to expose you, but he feared for his safety. So, he devised a plan. A disappearance, staged to trap you." Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Staged? You're saying Reginald planned this?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "Sir Reginald used the blood, perhaps his own, from a small cut, to create the illusion of violence. He left the cufflink in the lounge, the jacket in the sea, the rope in the hold. The chloroform? A red herring, placed to suggest foul play. He hid himself, likely in the hold.
Behind the crates we found scratched and moved. He wished to observe, to see who would act when they thought him gone. Sylvia Crane's voice trembled. But why?
The scratched one. Forbes hesitated, then nodded, leading Thomas Reed to the hold. Moments later, a shout echoed through the yacht. The guests rushed below, Poirot and Hastings at the forefront. Behind a stack of crates, Sir Reginald Ashbourne emerged, disheveled but alive, his face pale but resolute. "Reginald!" Lady Eleanor cried, rushing to him. Clara followed, sobbing with relief. Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse but firm. "I'm sorry, Eleanor, Clara. I had to know the truth. Crane, you've been bleeding me dry, threatening Sylvia to keep quiet. I staged this to force your hand." Crane's face twisted with rage. "You can't prove anything. This is a setup." Poirot's voice was calm but cutting. "No, monsieur. Your reactions tonight, your anger, your accusations, they betray you. The notebook, it lists your debts, confirmed by Sir Reginald's own records, which I found in his cabin after the letter. Sylvia, you knew, did you not?" Sylvia's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. I wanted to tell someone, but he threatened me. I'm so sorry, Sir Reginald." Poirot turned to the group. The trap, it was to see who would falter. Crane's anger, Sylvia's fear, Clara's grief, they all played their parts. Sir Reginald is safe, and the guilty, he is exposed. Captain Forbes stepped forward. "Mr. Crane, you'll be confined until we reach shore. The authorities will handle this." As Crane was led away, still protesting, Sir Reginald clasped Poirot's hand. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot. You saw through my ruse and saved my family." Poirot bowed slightly. "It is the work of the little grey cells, Sir Reginald. The truth, it always reveals itself." The yacht sailed on, its passengers shaken but relieved, the mystery resolved by Poirot's genius. The net had closed and the truth, as always, had prevailed. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The sapphire yacht sailed steadily toward the distant shore, its polished decks bathed in the soft light of dawn. The revelation of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's staged disappearance had lifted the suffocating veil of suspicion that had hung over the passengers and crew, replacing it with a mixture of relief, shock, and lingering unease. Victor Crane, now confined to his cabin under Captain Forbes's watch, awaited the authorities who would meet the yacht upon docking. The mystery, so meticulously unraveled by Hercule Poirot, had left its mark on all aboard, and the air was heavy with the aftertaste of truth. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the main deck, saw through it all. The blood, the jacket, the chloroform. "How did you know he was alive?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his gaze still on the sea. "Mon ami, the truth, it is like a melody. It requires harmony, not discord. The clues, they were too perfect, too arranged. The blood, too little for murder. The jacket, too conveniently found. The chloroform, too carelessly left. Hercule Poirot, he does not believe in such coincidences. The letter to Mademoiselle Clara, it spoke of betrayal and a plan. From this, I deduced Sir Reginald had orchestrated his own disappearance to expose a traitor." Hastings shook his head, marveling. It was brilliant, but risky. He could have been wrong, and someone might have actually attacked him. "Précisément," Poirot said, turning to face him. "That is why I watched, I listened, I applied the pressure. The guilty, they reveal themselves in their fear, their anger.
Monsieur Crane, his bluster hid a guilty heart. Madame Sylvia, her silence spoke of fear. The little gray cells, Hastings, they see what the eyes cannot. The guests were gathered in the dining salon for breakfast, though the mood was subdued. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne sat beside her husband, her auburn hair catching the morning light, her hand resting on his with a tenderness that had been absent before. Sir Reginald, still pale from his ordeal in the hold, managed a weary smile, his relief tempered by the weight of his deception. Clara sat close, her eyes no longer red with tears but bright with gratitude. Sylvia Crane was absent, confined to her cabin with her husband, her role as a reluctant accomplice now clear. Dr. Maurice Langston sipped coffee, his professional calm restored, though his eyes lingered on Poirot with respect. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, scribbled in her notebook, no doubt crafting a tale inspired by the drama. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey replaced by tea, looked thoughtful, his bluster softened by the resolution. The crew, Captain Forbes, Thomas Reed, Mrs. Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois, moved about their duties, their faces marked by relief, but also a quiet shame for their part in the suspicion. Sir Reginald rose, his voice steady, but emotional. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, I owe you both my deepest thanks. My plan was reckless, I admit, but I had to protect my family. Victor Crane's schemes threatened everything, and I needed proof. You, Mr. Poirot, saw through my ruse and saved us all. Poirot bowed slightly, his expression modest. Monsieur, it is the harmony achieved. But perhaps a cup of your finest tisane before we dock? The group chuckled, the tension easing for the first time in days. Clara approached Poirot, her voice shy but sincere. Mr. Poirot, you gave me back my father. I don't know how to thank you. Poirot placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle, your gratitude, it is enough. Keep your father close and trust in the truth. As the guests dispersed, Hastings and Poirot returned to the deck, where the coastline was now visible, a faint line of green against the blue. Hastings leaned against the railing, his mind turning over the case. Poirot, what made you suspect Crane so strongly? The notebook was compelling, but it could have been anyone. Poirot's gaze was thoughtful. The notebook, it was a clue, but it was Monsieur Crane's behavior that betrayed him. His anger, his quickness to accuse others, his control over Madame Sylvia. These were the signs of a man with much to hide. The letter from Sir Reginald confirmed it, speaking of a promise broken and a confrontation. Crane's debts, his manipulation of Sir Reginald's investments, these were the motives. Sylvia's fear, it was the final piece. Hastings nodded, impressed. And the chloroform? Was it really used, or just another part of the ruse? Poirot's lips curved. The chloroform, it was a clever touch by Sir Reginald. He placed the vial to suggest foul play, to heighten the drama. But the blood, the rope, the cufflink, these were his stage props, designed to make us believe he was gone. The little gray cells, they saw the pattern, the intention. The yacht drew closer to shore, the harbor of Sainte Marguerite coming into view. Captain Forbes approached, his face weary but grateful. Mr. Poirot, the authorities will meet us at the dock. Crane will face justice, thanks to you. Poirot nodded. Justice, Captain, is the balance of truth. Ensure Monsieur Crane is handed over, and let the law decide his fate. As Forbes departed, Hastings turned to Poirot, a question lingering. What now, Poirot? Back to London, another case. Poirot's eyes twinkled with mischief. Perhaps, Hastings, but first, a rest. The sea, it is beautiful, but the mind of Hercule Poirot, it craves the quiet of a London flat, a good book, and a tisane perfectly brewed. They stood in silence, watching the shore approach. The case behind over the decks, but the air was heavy with the aftermath of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's staged disappearance and the unmasking of Victor Crane's treachery. The authorities had boarded at dawn, taking Crane into custody, his protests echoing faintly as he was led away. Sylvia, his wife, had remained aboard, her fragile demeanor a stark contrast to the resolute calm that had settled over the other passengers. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the main deck, his straw hat shielding his eyes from the glare, his mind still grappling with the intricacies of the case. Beside him, Hercule Poirot stood immaculate in his cream-colored suit, his Panama hat tilted just so, his mustache a perfect arc of precision. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with a mix of relief and curiosity. "It's over, isn't it? Crane's in custody, Sir Reginald's safe, and the truth is out. But I can't help feeling there's more to this. Something we've missed." Poirot's green eyes twinkled with a knowing glint. "Mon ami, you are wise to sense the shadows that linger. The case, it is resolved, oui, but the human heart, it is never so simple. There are ripples still, questions unanswered, motives unspoken. Hercule Poirot, he observes these ripples, and he wonders." Hastings frowned, adjusting his hat. "Ripples? You mean Sylvia? She was complicit, wasn't she? Or is there someone else we should be looking at?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Patience, Hastings. The guilty have been named, but the innocent, they too have secrets. Let us join our companions for one final gathering, and perhaps these ripples will reveal themselves." The guests were assembled in the dining salon, their faces a mix of exhaustion and tentative relief. Sir Reginald Ashbourne sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the light, his expression one of weary triumph. Lady Eleanor, his wife, sat beside him, her auburn hair immaculate, her hand resting lightly on his arm, a gesture of reconciliation after the strain of his deception. Clara, their daughter, sat with a newfound brightness in her eyes, her grief replaced by gratitude for her father's safety. Dr. Maurice Langston sipped coffee, his professional calm fully restored, though his gaze lingered thoughtfully on the group. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, scribbled in her notebook, her sharp eyes missing nothing, as if the case were already taking shape as her next story. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey replaced by tea, looked more at ease, though his fingers drummed restlessly on the table. The crew, Captain Forbes, Thomas Reed, Mrs. Margaret Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois, stood near the door, their duties resumed but their faces marked by the weight of recent events. The plan was reckless, but necessary to expose Victor Crane's betrayal. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, your clarity and courage saved us. I am forever in your debt." Poirot bowed slightly, his expression modest. "Monsieur, it is the work of the little grey cells to restore order. Your gratitude, it is appreciated, but the truth, it is its own reward." Lady Eleanor's voice was soft but firm. "Mr. Poirot, your insight was remarkable, but I must ask, how did you know Reginald was alive? The clues seemed so damning." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame, the clues, they were too perfect, too staged. The blood, too sparse for murder,
The jacket too conveniently found. The chloroform too carelessly left. These were the work of a man who wished to be thought dead, to observe his enemies. The letter to Mademoiselle Clara, it spoke of a confrontation, a betrayal. From this I deduced Sir Reginald's plan. Clara leaned forward, her voice shy but earnest. Mr. Poirot, you said there were ripples. What did you mean? Is there more we should know? Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained precise. Mademoiselle, every heart here holds its secrets. Your father's plan exposed Monsieur Crane, but others aboard have their own burdens. Madame Sylvia, for instance. She knew of her husband's schemes, yet her fear kept her silent. And you, mademoiselle, you carried your father's letter, a weight you did not fully understand. Clara's eyes widened. The letter? It said he was protecting us, but from what, besides Victor? Poirot hesitated, then turned to Sir Reginald. Monsieur, perhaps it is time to share the full truth. The letter, it hinted at more than Crane's debts, did it not? Sir Reginald's face tightened, but he nodded. You're right, Mr. Poirot. I didn't tell the whole story. Victor wasn't just cheating me financially. He was blackmailing Sylvia, threatening to expose a scandal from her past to force my compliance in his schemes. I staged my disappearance to draw him out, but also to protect Sylvia. She suffered enough. A murmur of surprise passed through the group. Dr. Langston set down his coffee cup, his voice measured. A scandal? That explains her nervousness, but it's a heavy burden to carry alone. Miss Lyle's pencil paused, her eyes sharp. A scandal, Sir Reginald. Care to elaborate? As a writer, I find such details illuminating. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. It's not my story to tell. Sylvia's past is her own, and Crane exploited it. That's all you need to know. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. And yet, Madame Sylvia's silence, it protected other
Victor's plans. But I stayed silent because he threatened to ruin not just me, but Clara. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Me? What do you mean? Sylvia's eyes filled with tears. Years ago, before I married Victor, I was engaged to a man who was involved in a fraud. Victor found out and threatened to link Clara to it through a forged document, claiming she was complicit. I couldn't let that happen. Sir Reginald's face softened. Sylvia, you should have told me. I'd have protected you both. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Madam, your courage, it comes late, but it is welcome. The truth, it frees us all. Hastings leaned close to Poirot, whispering, You suspected Sylvia knew more, didn't you? That's why you pressed her. Poirot's lips curved. Précis, Hastings. The ripples, they are in the silences, the glances, the fears. Sylvia's burden was her love for Clara, a secret she carried to protect her. Captain Forbes stepped forward, his face grim but respectful. Mr. Poirot, the authorities have Crane's confession. He's admitted to the blackmail and the financial schemes, though he denies any violence. We'll dock soon and this will be behind us. Poirot nodded. Merci, Captain. The law will handle Monsieur Crane, but the heart, it heals more slowly. As the guests dispersed, Clara approached Sylvia, her voice soft. Thank you, Sylvia. I didn't know. I'm so sorry you went through that. Sylvia managed a weak smile. You're like a sister to me, Clara. I'd do anything to protect you. Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the deck, the harbor now bustling with activity as the yacht prepared to disembark. Hastings looked at his friend, a question lingering. Poirot, do you think there's more to uncover? Or is this truly the end? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The case, it is closed, Hastings. But the human heart, it is an endless mystery. For now, we leave the sapphire yacht and its secrets, content that order is restored. As the passengers prepared to disembark, Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene. The mystery had been solved, The ripples calmed, but the echoes of truth would linger, a testament to the power of his little gray cells. Chapter 13. The Hidden Truths. The sapphire yacht rested quietly at the harbor of St. Marguerite, its journey concluded under the pale light of a late summer morning. The resolution of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's staged disappearance and the exposure of Victor Crane's blackmail had brought a fragile peace to the passengers and crew, but an undercurrent of unease lingered. The authorities had taken Crane into custody, and Sylvia's confession of her complicity, driven by fear for Clara, had laid bare the tangled web of secrets aboard. Yet, for Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the main deck with to the edges of the truth, beside him, Hercule Poirot stood with his usual immaculate poise, his cream-colored suit pristine, his Panama hat tilted just so, his green eyes scanning the bustling harbor with a quiet intensity. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "Crane's confession ties up the blackmail and the financial schemes, but I can't shake the feeling we're missing something. Sylvia's story, Clara's letter, there's more to it, isn't there?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his subtle amusement at Hastings' persistence. "Mon ami, your instincts, they grow sharper with each case. The truth, it has been revealed, but like a diamond, it has many facets. Some remain in shadow, hidden by those who fear the light. Hercule Poirot, he senses these shadows, and he will illuminate them before we depart this yacht." Hastings frowned, adjusting his hat. "You mean there's another layer to this? Someone else involved?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Not another crime, Hastings, but another motive, another secret. The human heart, it is complex, and aboard this yacht, it has whispered truths that only the little gray cells can hear. Come, we shall gather our companions once more, and we shall see what lies beneath." The guests and crew were summoned to the dining salon, their faces a mix of weariness and curiosity. Sir Reginald Ashbourne sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the light, his expression one of cautious relief. Lady Eleanor, his wife, sat beside him, her auburn hair immaculate, her hand resting on his with a warmth that spoke of renewed trust. Clara, their daughter, sat with a tentative smile, her eyes still bright with gratitude for her father's safety. Dr. Morris Langston sipped tea, his professional calm a steady presence, though his gaze flicked to Poirot with a hint of apprehension. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, scribbled in her notebook, her keen eyes darting from face to face, as if sensing a new chapter unfolding. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey replaced by coffee, looked thoughtful, his fingers still. Sylvia Crane, now free to join the group, sat quietly, her delicate features pale but resolute. The crew, Captain Forbes, Thomas Reed, Mrs. Margaret Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois, stood near the door, their duties paused as they awaited Poirot's words. Poirot stepped to the center of the room, his small frame commanding absolute attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "The mystery of Sir Reginald's steady but tinged with regret. Mr. Poirot, you've done us a great service. But if there's more to uncover, I assure you I've told all I know. My plan was to protect my family. And it worked. Thanks to you." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur, your courage, it is admirable. But the letter to Mademoiselle Clara, it hinted at more than Crane's betrayal. It spoke of promises broken and the need to protect not just from financial ruin, but from shame. There is another secret, is there not?"
Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her husband's arm, her voice sharp. "What are you implying, Mr. Poirot? Reginald has explained everything. What more could there be?" Poirot turned to Sylvia, his gaze gentle but piercing. "Madame Crane, you spoke of a scandal from your past, one that Monsieur Crane used to control you. But there is more, no? You protected Mademoiselle Clara, but at what cost to yourself?" Sylvia's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. I told you Victor threatened to link Clara to a fraud from my past. It was a lie, but he had forged documents. I stayed silent to protect her, to keep her name clear." Clara reached for Sylvia's hand, her voice soft. "Sylvia, you didn't have to carry that alone. Why didn't you tell me?" Sylvia's tears spilled over. "Because I love you, Clara. You're like family to me. I couldn't let Victor ruin you." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And yet, madame, there is another truth you have not shared. The lipstick on the whiskey glass in the lounge. Mrs. Henshaw saw it, a faint smudge. It was yours, was it not?" Sylvia's face paled, her hands trembling. Yes, it was mine. I was in the lounge that night after dinner. Reginald asked to meet me there privately. He knew about Victor's blackmail and wanted to help me. We talked and I left my glass behind." Sir Reginald's face tightened. "Sylvia, I told you I'd handle it. Why didn't you trust me?" Sylvia's voice broke. "I was afraid, Reginald. Victor had me so scared I didn't know what to do." Poirot turned to Mrs. Henshaw, who stood nervously by the door. "Madame, you cleared the glass, but you did not mention the lipstick until pressed. Why?" Mrs. Henshaw's hands twisted together. I didn't think it mattered, sir. I saw the glass, thought it was out of place, and cleaned it. I didn't want to cause trouble for Mrs. Crane." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet your silence, it protected someone else."
Hesitated, his eyes darting to Sylvia. I saw her on deck, near the stern, around 10:30. She looked upset, like she'd been crying. I didn't think it was my place to say." Sylvia's voice was barely audible.
"I was there, yes. After talking to Reginald, I needed air. I was so scared I didn't know what to do." Poirot's gaze softened. "Madame, your fear, it is understandable. But your silence, it allowed Crane to continue his schemes. And you, Monsieur Reed, your omission, it complicated the truth." Miss Lyle closed her notebook, her voice sharp. "Mr. Poirot, are you saying Sylvia and Reed are complicit in something more? Or is this just the fallout of Crane's actions?" Poirot's lips curved. "Mademoiselle, there is no further crime. Only hidden truths. Madame Sylvia met Sir Reginald to seek his help, but her fear kept her from confessing fully. Monsieur Reed saw her, but his loyalty, or perhaps his fear of involvement, kept him silent. These are the ripples of the human heart, the secrets that linger even after the crime is solved." Dr. Langston spoke up, his voice calm but curious. "So there's no more to the case? Just these personal secrets?" Poirot nodded. "The case, it is closed, monsieur. But the heart, it continues to speak. Hercule Poirot, he listens and he understands." As the guests dispersed, Clara lingered, her eyes on Sylvia. "Thank you for protecting me, Sylvia. I wish you'd told me sooner." Sylvia managed a weak smile. "I wanted to keep you safe, Clara. That's all that mattered." Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the deck, the harbor bustling with activity as the passengers prepared to disembark. Hastings leaned close. "Poirot, you knew there was more to Sylvia's story, didn't you? That's why you pressed her." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Précisément, Hastings. The truth. It is not just in the crime, but in the silences. Sylvia's fear, Reed's hesitation, these were the final pieces of the puzzle." As the yacht's gangway lowered, Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene. The case was closed, the hidden truths revealed, and the sapphire yacht could finally rest, its secrets laid bare by the genius of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The sapphire yacht lay docked at the harbor of St. Marguerite, its polished teak and gleaming brass catching the midday sun as gulls wheeled overhead. The resolution of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's staged disappearance, the exposure of Victor Crane's blackmail, and the revelation of Sylvia Crane's protective silence had brought a tentative calm to the passengers and crew. Yet as the yacht prepared for its final
Stood with his characteristic poise, his cream-colored suit immaculate, his Panama hat perfectly angled, his green eyes scanning the bustling harbor with a quiet intensity that suggested the mystery was not entirely closed.
"Poirot,"
Hastings said, his voice low.
"We've got Crane in custody. Sylvia's secret is out and Sir Reginald is safe. But I can't help feeling there's something we haven't addressed. Those clues, the chloroform, the rope, the cufflink, they were all part of Sir Reginald's plan, but what about the crew? Reed's nervousness, Mrs. Henshaw's hesitation. There's more to their stories, isn't there?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his amusement at Hastings's persistence. "Mon ami, your instinct for the unfinished, it is commendable. The case, it is resolved. But the human soul, it is a tapestry of many threads. Some remain loose, not because they hide a crime, but because they hide shame, fear, or loyalty. Hercule Poirot, he sees these threads, and he will tug them gently before we leave this yacht." Hastings adjusted his hat, frowning. "You mean the crew? Reed and Mrs. Henshaw, they've been cagey. Do you think they knew more about Sir Reginald's plan?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Not his plan, Hastings, but his state of mind. They saw, they heard, and they kept silent. Perhaps out of duty, perhaps out of fear. Let us gather our companions one last time, and we shall see what final truths emerge." The guests and crew were summoned to the dining salon, their faces a mix of relief and weariness. Sir Reginald Ashbourne sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the light, his expression one of quiet gratitude. Lady Eleanor, his wife, sat beside him, her auburn hair framing a face softened by reconciliation. Clara, their daughter, sat with a gentle smile, her hands no longer clutching a handkerchief but resting calmly in her lap. Dr. Maurice Langston sipped tea, his professional demeanor intact, though his eyes held a flicker of curiosity. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, scribbled in her notebook, her sharp gaze darting from face to face as if anticipating a final twist for her story. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey replaced by coffee, looked more relaxed, though his fingers tapped a restless rhythm. Sylvia Crane sat quietly, her pale face resolute, her confession having lifted a weight from her shoulders. The crew, Captain Forbes, Thomas Reed, Mrs. Margaret Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois, stood near the door, their expressions a mix of deference and unease. Poirot stepped to the center of the room, his small frame commanding absolute attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "The mystery of Sir Reginald's disappearance has been unraveled, and Monsieur Crane's treachery exposed. Yet Hercule Poirot senses that some truths remain unspoken. Not
Share what you have withheld for the sake of clarity and closure." A heavy silence settled over the group, their eyes shifting uneasily. Sir Reginald spoke first, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "Mr. Poirot, you've given us back our peace. If there's more to say, I assure you my secrets are laid bare. My plan was to protect my family, and it succeeded, thanks to you. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Monsieur, your courage was great, but your plan, it required the silence of others. Monsieur Reed, Madame Henshaw, you saw things, heard things that you did not share. Why? Thomas Reed, the first mate, shifted nervously, his boyish grin long gone. Mr. Poirot, I told you I found the notebook in the hold and forgot to report it. I didn't know about Sir Reginald's plan, I swear. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And yet, monsieur, you saw Madame Sylvia on deck at 10:30, upset near the stern. You also saw the crate in the hold, scratched and moved. Did you suspect Sir Reginald was hiding there? Reed's face flushed. I didn't know for sure, but I wondered. The crate was out of place and I heard a noise in the hold that night. Like someone shifting something heavy. I thought it was just cargo settling, but I didn't want to get involved. Mrs. Henshaw's hands twisted together, her voice trembling. Mr. Poirot, I saw the whiskey glass with lipstick in the lounge, as I said. I knew it was Mrs. Crane's, but I didn't want to cause her trouble. She's been so kind to me, and I could see she was scared. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Your loyalty, madame, it is commendable, but it obscured the truth. And you, Monsieur Dubois, you were in the galley when the chloroform vial was hidden. Did you see nothing? Pierre Dubois puffed out his chest, his voice indignant. Monsieur, I am a chef, not a spy. The galley is my kingdom, and I saw nothing but my ingredients. That vial, it was not there when I left at 10:30. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, it was found behind a canister, a place you would know well. Perhaps you saw something and chose silence out of fear or favor. Dubois' face reddened, but he shook his head. No, monsieur. I swear, I saw nothing. Poirot turned to Captain Forbes, who stood rigidly by the door. Captain, you knew Sir Reginald well. Did he confide in you about his plan? Forbes hesitated, his weathered face tightening. He didn't tell me outright, Mr. Poirot, but he was acting strange before we sailed, secretive, checking the hold himself. I thought he was just particular, but now I should have asked more questions. Poirot's lips curved slightly. The silence of duty, it is a heavy burden, but it is clear now, saying the crew was complicit in Sir Reginald's scheme, or just negligent. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Neither, mademoiselle. They were human, caught in the web of loyalty and fear. Their silence was not criminal, but it complicated the path to truth. Sylvia spoke, her voice soft but steady. Mr. Poirot, I'm sorry for my part in this. I should have told someone about Victor's threat sooner. I was so afraid for Clara. Clara reached for Sylvia's hand, her eyes warm. You protected me, Sylvia. I'll never forget that. Sir Reginald's voice was gruff with emotion. Mr. Poirot, you've not only saved my family, but shown us our own failings. How can we thank you? Poirot bowed slightly. Monsieur, the thanks of Hercule Poirot is in the restoration of harmony. The threads, they are now woven together, and the tapestry is complete. As the guests dispersed, preparing to disembark, Hastings leaned close to Poirot. You knew the crew was holding back, didn't you? That's why you pressed them. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, Hastings. The little grey cells, they hear the silences as loudly as the words. The crew's omissions were not guilt, but human frailty, and now they are free of it. The gangway was lowered, and the passengers began to disembark, their steps lighter, but their hearts still heavy with the weight of the ordeal. Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene as he and Hastings prepared to leave the sapphire yacht behind, its secrets finally unraveled. Chapter 15. The Farewell. The sapphire yacht lay serene at the harbor of St. Marguerite, its polished decks gleaming under the late summer sun as the final preparations for disembarkation were made.
The tumultuous events of the past days, the staged disappearance of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the unmasking of Victor Crane's blackmail, the revelations of Sylvia Crane's protective silence, and the crew's unspoken loyalties had left an indelible mark on all aboard. The mystery, so masterfully unraveled by Hercule Poirot, had restored order, but the echoes of its secrets lingered, like the faint lapping of waves against the hull. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the main deck, his straw hat in hand, the sea breeze carrying a sense of closure mingled with the bittersweet weight of departure. Beside him, Hercule Poirot stood with his characteristic elegance, his cream-colored suit pristine, his Panama hat tilted just so, his green eyes reflecting the calm of a case concluded. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice soft with reflection. "It's over, isn't it? The yacht's docking. Crane's in custody and Sir Reginald safe with his family. Yet I can't help feeling this case was more than just a clever ruse. It was about trust, betrayal, and
About the crime, but about the souls entangled in it. The Sapphire Yacht. It was a stage for human frailty, greed, fear, loyalty, love. Hercule Poirot, he solves the puzzle, but it is the understanding of these truths that brings true resolution. Hastings adjusted his stance, gazing at the bustling harbor. You tied up every loose end, Poirot. The crew's silence, Sylvia's secret, Sir Reginald's plan, it all came together. But what happens now? Will they heal from this? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The heart, Hastings, it mends with time, but it carries its scars. Come, let us join our companions for a final farewell, and we shall see how they face the future. The guests and crew were gathered in the dining salon for a final gathering before disembarking, their faces a tapestry of relief, gratitude, and quiet introspection. Sir Reginald Ashbourne stood at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the light, his posture upright but softened by the ordeal's resolution. Lady Eleanor, his wife, stood beside him, her auburn hair gleaming, her hand resting lightly on his arm, a symbol of their renewed bond. Clara, their daughter, sat with a gentle smile, her eyes bright with hope, her earlier grief replaced by a quiet strength. Dr. Maurice Langston sipped coffee, his professional calm a steady presence, though his gaze held a newfound respect for Poirot's genius. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, closed her notebook with a deliberate snap, her sharp eyes softened by the weight of the story she would soon write. Colonel Rupert Grayson, his usual whiskey replaced by tea, looked at ease, his bluster replaced by a reflective calm. Sylvia Crane sat quietly, her pale face resolute, her confession having freed her from the shadows of her husband's control. The crew, Captain Forbes, Thomas Reed, Mrs. Margaret Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois, stood near the door, their faces marked by a mix of relief and humility. Sir Reginald raised a glass of sparkling water, his voice steady but warm. My friends, this voyage began as a celebration and became a trial. But thanks to Mr. Poirot and Captain Hastings, it ends in truth. I deceived you all to protect my family, and for that, I am sorry. But your patience and Mr. Poirot's brilliance have restored us. To you, sir, my deepest gratitude. The group raised their glasses, murmuring their agreement. Poirot bowed slightly, his expression modest. Monsieur, the gratitude of Hercule Poirot is in the harmony restored. The Sapphire Yacht, it has been a challenge,
but heartfelt. Mr. Poirot, you gave me back my father and showed me Sylvia's courage. I'll never forget what you've done. Poirot placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle,
Your heart, it is strong. Hold fast to it, and to those who love you. Sylvia spoke, her voice steady despite her pallor. Mr. Poirot, I was afraid to speak, but you gave me the courage to tell the truth. I can start over now, free of Victor's shadow. Poirot nodded, his gaze warm. Madame, the truth, it is a heavy burden, but also a liberation. You have chosen wisely. Miss Lyle leaned forward, her voice curious. Mr. Poirot, this case, it's a novel in itself. The deception, the motives, the human drama. May I write it? With your permission? Poirot's lips curved. Mademoiselle, you may write. But remember, the truth, it is more than a story. It is the lives it touches. Be kind in your telling. Colonel Grayson raised his glass, his voice gruff. To Poirot, the sharpest mind I've ever met. You've made an old soldier rethink his instincts. Dr. Langston nodded, his tone measured. Indeed, Mr. Poirot, your logic was impeccable, and your compassion unexpected. You've taught us all something. Captain Forbes stepped forward, his weathered face respectful. Mr. Poirot, the crew owes you an apology. Our silence, unintentional or not, complicated things. You've shown us the value of speaking up. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Captain, your duty is to your ship, but the truth, it is the duty of us all. You have served well. Thomas Reed, Mrs. Henshaw, and Pierre Dubois nodded, their faces reflecting a quiet resolve to move forward. The salon filled with the soft hum of conversation, the tension of the past days giving way to a tentative hope. As the guests prepared to disembark, Hastings and Poirot stepped onto the deck, the gangway lowered, and the harbor bustling with activity. Hastings leaned close, his voice reflective. Poirot, this case, it wasn't just about solving a mystery, was it? It was about understanding people, their fears, their loyalties. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Precisement, Hastings. The crime, it is the surface, but the heart, it is the depth. Hercule Poirot solves the puzzle, but he also sees the souls within it. They walked down the gangway, the sapphire yacht looming behind them, its secrets laid bare. Hastings glanced to the next challenge that awaited.